Picture this exact scenario. It is late on a rainy Tuesday evening. You have just finished an exhausting 12-hour shift at work. Your head is pounding, and your phone is buzzing incessantly on the passenger seat. You pull into a brightly lit gas station off the highway, operating purely on physical autopilot. You roll up to the pump, step out into the cold air, grab the nozzle, slide your credit card into the reader, and let the fuel flow. You stand there for 3 minutes, staring blankly at your phone, listening to the rhythmic clicking of the gallon counter spinning on the pump screen. Once the handle clicks off, you cap your tank, get back into the driver's seat, turn the key in the ignition, and pull onto the road. For the first half-mile, everything feels entirely normal. But then, as you step on the gas pedal to merge onto the highway, you feel a subtle hesitation. The engine stumbles. A fraction of a second later, a deep, metallic knocking sound begins to echo from under the hood, a harsh, rhythmic clattering that sounds like a handful of loose ball bearings bouncing around inside a metal blender. The accelerator pedal goes completely dead beneath your foot. The check engine light flashes rapidly on your dashboard, accompanied by a battery warning light, as the power steering suddenly cuts out. Your vehicle glides to a silent, helpless halt on the shoulder of the highway. In that terrifying, quiet moment, as hazard lights blink against the dark pavement, a cold wave of realization washes over you. You look down at your receipt or think back to the colored handle you grabbed at the pump. You didn't grab the standard black handle. You grabbed the green one. Or perhaps you were driving a modern diesel truck and you carelessly topped it off with unleaded gasoline. Cross-fuel contamination is one of the most common, costly, and terrifying mechanical mistakes a driver can make. Every single year, hundreds of thousands of motorists across North America and Europe pump the wrong fuel into their gas tanks. In some cases, it results in a mild inconvenience that costs a few $100s to drain and flush. In other cases, it triggers a catastrophic, domino-effect mechanical collapse that instantly destroys thousands of dollars worth of precision machinery, turning a perfectly good vehicle into an expensive driveway ornament. To understand why pouring the wrong liquid into a tank can cause such absolute carnage, we have to look past the surface of the gas station pump. We need to dive deep into the internal physics, the complex organic chemistry, and the microscopic tolerances of the modern internal combustion engine. To the average driver, gasoline and diesel fuel seem relatively similar. They are both clear-to-amber liquids derived from crude oil, bought at the same roadside stations, and burned to propel heavy metal vehicles. But chemically, gasoline and diesel are as different as water and motor oil. It all begins at the oil refinery during fractional distillation, where crude oil is heated inside massive industrial towers to separate different hydrocarbon chains. Gasoline is made of lightweight hydrocarbons, typically containing between 4 and 12 carbon atoms per molecule. Because these molecules are light, gasoline evaporates extremely easily at room temperature. However, gasoline is chemically engineered to resist burning purely from heat and compression. This resistance to self-ignition is what we call the octane rating. In a gasoline engine, we want the fuel-air mixture to compress tightly without exploding on its own, waiting patiently until the spark plug fires. Diesel fuel is pulled from a much lower level in the refining tower. Its hydrocarbon chains are heavy, containing between 10 and 20 carbon atoms per molecule. Diesel is practically a light oil. It is dense and has a high flash point. More importantly, diesel is rated by its Cetane number, which measures how easily and quickly the fuel auto-ignites under heat and pressure. Diesel engines do not have spark plugs. Instead, they compress air so violently, often at compression ratios of 16:1 or higher, that the air superheats to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The moment heavy diesel is sprayed into that red-hot compressed air, it instantly auto-ignites. There is one more critical difference that dictates whether your engine survives a mix-up: lubricity. Because diesel is fundamentally a refined oil, it possesses high natural lubricity, coating metal parts in a slippery, protective film. Gasoline, on the other hand, is a powerful solvent. It dissolves grease, strips away oil films, and cleans metal surfaces down to the bare grain. Let's begin with what mechanics universally consider the absolute worst-case scenario: pumping gasoline into a diesel vehicle. If you drive a modern diesel vehicle, whether it's a heavy-duty pickup truck, a European diesel sedan, or a commercial transport van, introducing gasoline into the fuel tank is a recipe for instant mechanical annihilation. To understand why, we have to look at the heart of a modern diesel fuel system: the high-pressure fuel pump and the common rail injectors. Modern diesel engines operate using what is called common rail direct injection. To meet modern emissions and performance standards, these engines must vaporize heavy diesel fuel into a microscopic mist. To achieve this, the engine's high-pressure fuel pump squeezes the fuel to mind-boggling pressure levels, often between 25,000 and 35,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, that is more than 10 times the pressure found inside a heavy scuba diving tank, operating inside a pump component no larger than a toaster. At 35,000 psi, the internal mechanical parts of a diesel fuel pump, the tiny steel pistons, rollers, and shafts, operate with microscopic clearances measured in microns. There are no rubber seals or traditional engine oil passages inside these high-pressure pumps. They rely 100% on the slippery, lubricating properties of the diesel fuel itself to keep the internal metal components floating smoothly past one another. Now, imagine what happens when you pour unleaded gasoline into that system. The moment gasoline enters the high-pressure fuel pump, its solvent properties instantly wipe away the protective oil film covering the pump's internal rollers and pistons. Stripped of lubrication, bare metal strikes bare metal at thousands of revolutions per minute. The results are catastrophic and fast. Within seconds, the extreme friction creates intense local heat. The hardened steel components begin to gall, score, and grind each other down. The pump essentially begins to eat itself alive from the inside out. As the pump disintegrates, it generates millions of microscopic, razor-sharp steel shavings and metallic dust. This cloud of metallic debris is swept forward by the pressurized fuel stream directly into the engine's fuel rail and injectors. The fuel injectors in a modern diesel engine are engineering marvels. They feature microscopic nozzles drilled by precision lasers, opening and closing up to 5 times per single engine combustion stroke. When the metallic debris from the destroying fuel pump reaches these injectors, it acts like liquid sandpaper. The tiny nozzles are instantly scored, clogged, or jammed wide open. While this mechanical destruction is occurring within the fuel delivery lines, an even more violent process is unfolding inside the engine's combustion cylinders. Remember, gasoline has a very low auto-ignition point compared to diesel when exposed to volatile conditions, but it resists spark ignition octanes. However, inside a diesel cylinder, the air is compressed so fiercely that the temperature exceeds 1,000 degrees. As the gasoline-contaminated mixture is injected into this superheated chamber, the gasoline does not burn in a smooth, controlled manner. It detonates prematurely and violently, a condition known as extreme pre-ignition or uncontrolled detonation. Instead of pushing the piston down smoothly during its power stroke, the fuel explodes while the piston is still traveling upward on its compression stroke. The resulting shock waves slam into the top of the piston with the force of a sledgehammer. Connecting rods buckle and bend under the unnatural stress. Piston rings shatter, valve stems warp, and cylinder head gaskets blow out. In extreme cases, The sheer explosive shock can crack the engine block itself or melt holes straight through the center of the aluminum pistons. By the time the engine sputters and dies, the entire fuel system, from the fuel tank, transfer pumps, low-pressure lines, high-pressure pump, fuel rail, and expensive injectors, is completely filled with pulverized metal filings and ruined beyond repair. Replacing a completely metal-contaminated diesel fuel system and rebuilding a damaged engine block routinely results in repair bills ranging from $8,000 to well over $15,000. Now, let's flip the coin and look at the opposite scenario. What happens when you put diesel fuel into a gasoline car? First, there is a bit of physical good news built into the infrastructure of gas stations, particularly in North America. Fuel pump manufacturers and safety regulators recognized decades ago that cross-fuel contamination was a major hazard. To prevent human error, they implemented a physical safeguard: the standardized nozzle diameter. At almost all commercial gas stations, the green nozzle used for diesel fuel is physically manufactured with a larger diameter, typically about 15/16 of an inch. The filler neck opening on a standard unleaded gasoline car, meanwhile, is smaller, fitted with a spring-loaded trapdoor designed strictly to accept narrow gasoline nozzles measuring 13/16 of an inch. In simple terms, under normal circumstances, a standard diesel pump nozzle physically will not fit inside the fuel filler neck of a modern gasoline vehicle. However, accidents still happen. Drivers using mislabeled cans in their garage, using aftermarket funnel adapters, or filling older classic vehicles without restrictive filler necks can easily manage to pour diesel into a gasoline tank. So when heavy diesel enters a gasoline engine system, what actually breaks? Fortunately for your bank account, diesel in a gasoline car is far less mechanically destructive than gasoline in a diesel, though it will still bring your journey to a grinding halt. When you start a gasoline engine that has diesel in the tank, the car will usually start up fine and run smoothly for a minute or two. This is because the fuel lines and fuel rail are still filled with the residual pure gasoline that was left over from before you filled up. However, as the fuel pump draws from the bottom of the tank, the thick, heavy diesel fuel travels up the fuel lines and reaches the gasoline fuel injectors. Gasoline fuel pumps and injectors operate at vastly lower pressures than diesel systems, typically around 40 to 60 psi for traditional port injection, or up to 2,000 to 3,000 psi for modern direct injection gasoline engines. Because diesel is much thicker and has a higher viscosity than gasoline, the fuel pump struggles to push it through the microscopic injector orifices. The spray pattern instantly degrades from a fine mist into a thick, uneven stream of liquid droplets. When this thick stream of diesel enters the gasoline combustion chamber, the engine encounters an immediate chemical wall. Gasoline engines rely on electric spark plugs to ignite the air-fuel mixture, but spark plugs do not generate enough heat energy to ignite cold, heavy, low-volatility diesel fuel. The spark fires across the electrode, but the diesel simply refuses to light. The engine begins to misfire violently. Unburned liquid diesel coats the cold walls of the combustion chamber, washing past the piston rings and diluting the crankcase engine oil. Dense, dark, acrid white and gray smoke billows out of the tailpipe as tiny amounts of unburned diesel hit the hot exhaust manifold. Within a few hundred yards, the spark plugs become completely fouled, caked in a thick layer of wet, black, oily soot. The electrical arc can no longer bridge the fouled gap, ignition fails entirely, and the engine stalls out. While the experience of coughing up thick smoke and stalling on the roadside feels dramatic and terrifying, the actual physical damage to metal engine components is usually minimal. Diesel does not strip lubrication. In fact, As in oil, it lubricates the gasoline pump as it passes through. It does not cause violent high-octane detonation. The real danger to a gasoline engine from diesel contamination comes down to downstream emissions components. If you force the engine to run on a heavy gas-diesel mix for an extended period, unburned diesel fuel travels down the exhaust system and reaches the catalytic converter. Catalytic converters rely on precious metals like platinum, palladium, and rhodium running at extreme temperatures, upward of 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, to burn off raw exhaust emissions. When raw, unburned heavy diesel strikes a red-hot catalytic converter, it ignites violently on the delicate ceramic honeycomb lattice inside, melting the internal substrate, clogging the precious metal pores, and destroying a component that costs upwards of $1,500 to replace. This brings us to the single, most critical factor in this entire equation. Did you turn the ignition key? The moment you open the driver's door or turn the key to the on position, the vehicle's computer commands the electric fuel pump in the tank to switch on and prime the lines. If you realize your mistake at the pump before turning the key, the contaminated fuel is safely isolated inside the plastic reservoir of your gas tank. It has not reached the lines, filters, or engine. In this scenario, 1. Do not turn the key or press the start button. 2. Place the transmission in neutral and manually push the vehicle to a safe stall. 3. Call a roadside tow truck to take the car to a mechanic who can simply drain and flush the tank. If you realized your mistake after driving off and stalling, 1. Safely pull over immediately and turn off the ignition completely. 2. Do not attempt to restart the engine, as cranking forces more contaminated fuel through the system. 3. Inform your mechanic immediately so they can perform a full system flush, replace filters, clean or replace spark plugs, and inspect the fuel pump for metal debris. At the end of the day, internal combustion engines are magnificent pieces of chemical and mechanical engineering. They operate at extreme temperatures, handle immense internal pressures, and execute precise physical events thousands of times every single minute. But for all their strength, durability, and modern computer controls, they remain completely dependent on one simple variable: receiving the exact chemical compound they were engineered to burn. Understanding the difference between high-octane gasoline solvents and high-cetane diesel lubricants isn't just trivia for automotive mechanics. It is critical knowledge that protects one of the largest financial investments you make in your daily life. The next time you pull up to a busy gas station, take a brief 2-second pause before picking up that handle. Double-check the label on the pump, confirm the color of the nozzle, verify the octane or cetane rating, and make sure you're feeding your engine the exact liquid power it needs to keep you rolling down the road